Yo, I want to quickly talk about this idea of grips and strokes. So, ultimately, what this is really about is letting this little wooden thing do all of the work for us. And one of the biggest elements of letting this thing do the work is ultimately being as relaxed and comfortable as possible. As soon as we have some tension that appears in our hands and in our arms, it's actually really hard for the stick to be free and to bounce on its own. So, first things first, how we hold the stick. So we always typically want to pinch the stick between our pointer finger and our thumb mostly, and our thumb is going to point along the stick. Alright, so no matter what orientation my hand or the stick is in, my thumb is always pointing along. That way I can always be aware of which way the stick is pointing. Same way, if I think about pointing somewhere with my thumb, it's exactly the same thing, pointing somewhere with the stick. Now where we pinch our fingers along the stick is really important because it's going to give us more or less natural bounce with the stick. So the freest way that the stick can bounce, something like that, right? Without me touching it at all. But what we're really trying to do is find the point to pinch along the stick where it's going to bounce the best for us naturally. So if I hold the stick way at the back like this, down near the butt end, and I hold it between my pointer finger and my thumb, and then I hold it over my drum and I let it go, it goes and it falls down dead really quickly. If I hold the stick way up, somewhere in the middle of the stick, and I do the same thing, it doesn't even want to fall down because it's perfectly balanced. I need a little bit of weight at the front. Now, if I hold it somewhere that feels quite natural to me, and often I can tell because there'll be a little bit of stick that pokes out the bottom of my hand. Now, of course, we've all got different sized hands, so this might not work for everybody, but what I'm really looking for with this drop and the pinch test is when I let my thumb go, I'm looking for that nice long bump, long cascading fall. Right? If I hold it too far at the back, it falls down dead too quick. If I hold it too far forward, it doesn't want to fall down at all. So when I get that nice slow cascading fall, that's how I know I'm probably holding it at least somewhere pretty close to where it's going to do most of the work for me. Now, a couple of things that I will always look for in quality technique and relaxation. Number one is that I typically like to see this gap here in my hands nice and open, because if it's open, it means that I'm not pinching my fingers there too tight. And you can try this if you're holding your stick and pinching between pointer and thumb mostly with our other three fingers wrapped around. As soon as you close this gap here in our hand, this muscle starts to kind of tense, and it's really hard if you ever start playing like this. Once that muscle gets tense and starts to get a bit sore, no amount of shaking your hands out is going to actually release that tension. So we want to avoid doing that from the beginning. Now, of course, when I'm sitting here naturally in front of my snare drum in particular, and we do a lot of kind of stick technique stuff on this drum or on a practice pad in a similar capacity, usually what I want to use is my wrist as my primary motion or my primary movement. Now, when we're using this movement, I like to think of it like we're knocking on a door or something similar. But if you take your hand, you hold your hand out like you're going to shake somebody's hand, you'll notice that if you try and touch your thumb to your forearm, or if you try and touch your pinky finger to your forearm, we don't have a huge range of motion in this axis, right? But if I turn my hand sideways like this, all of a sudden I have a way larger range of motion with my wrist. So often if we're playing with our wrist strokes on our snare drum, I want to see the backs of our hands facing the roof. That way we can utilize this wrist motion really nicely. And what I'm really looking for is that nice loosey-goosey relaxation. You can see that if I just play a single stroke on my snare drum, watch my hand. I'll start in an up position and I'll throw the stick down, and even though my hand is going to stay down, the stick is going to bounce back up. Right? So even though my hand stays down, the stick naturally wants to bounce. That's what I'm always looking for. If the stick is bouncing up, then I never have to actually pick the stick up off the head. All I have to do is throw it down. It's a bit like dribbling a basketball, where we don't think of holding the ball and putting it on the ground and picking it up. All we do is we throw the ball down, physics does the rest of the work, it comes back up, we catch it a little bit, and we just repeat that same motion. We can do the exact same thing with our drum and with our sticks. Right, we want to avoid this quality of the sticks going down and us holding it down, because we'll lose that natural bounce. We always want to be throwing it down, and it's going to bounce back up for us. What this will allow us to do, if we need it, right, is get some speed, get some smoothness, get some finesse, and ultimately we're not going to have to be sweating bullets when we're playing, because we're not going to be expending all this energy. As drummers, we want to be, I wouldn't say as lazy as we can, but we want to be as economical as we can in terms of our movement. So anything that we can do to let this do more of the work for us. If I have to pick up the stick, that's twice the amount of effort I'm willing to put in, right? So we throw it down and we're looking for that natural bounce on the way up. Another little telltale sign for me that the stick is relaxed in your hand is that the back of the stick is free to move. Because I can, you know, if I'm like holding a wand, I can move the front of the stick and it can go really fast, but you'll see it's anchored to the back of my hand there. And what will naturally happen is I'll have to pick the stick back up, right? And that's fine in some settings, but most of the time, if I can let the stick bounce back up for me, then all I have to do is throw it down. And if I can maintain relaxation while I'm doing it, that's all there is to it. So going nice and slow, getting nice and comfortable is one of the first steps that we can do to building quality habits, so that when we're moving around the kit, when we're playing stuff that's really fast and really fancy, we're not having to expend heaps of energy, we're not having to get tension or tightness in our arms or our hands to get there.